Hello and welcome to How to Select the Best ISO 27001 Scope, Extended versus Limited, a webinar presented by Mr. Musa Wesutsa. My name is Ardian Berisha and I'm the Portfolio Marketing Manager for Information Security and Management at PCB. In today's webinar, we will discuss how to select the best ISO 27001 scope and the importance of proper scope selection when planning the ISMS. Our presenter for today, Musa Wesutsa, is an information security expert with years of experience in IT, network security, and ISO 27001 implementations, ranging from manufacturing to telecommunications and mobile money. You will have the opportunity to submit written questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the question pane of the control panel. You may send your questions at any time during the presentations, as we will collect and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Now, without further ado, we will turn over to Mr. Musa. Mr. Musa, please, you may start with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Hello, everybody. Where you're connecting from, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. So, as Adrian has introduced, my name is Musa. I'm with Sentinel Africa. And in today's webinar, we're going to discuss how to select the best ISO 27000 scope, and we're looking at two aspects of it. So we're looking either at the extended scope or at the limited scope. So I'll get right to it. Now, the reason why I picked this topic is, as I have interacted with people out there, interacted with clients, done some training, so talking to students, one of the key things that always comes up is how long does it take to implement the ISMS? So that is usually among the first 5 questions that I get when I speak to a client. They want to find out how long will it take me to implement this ISMS in an organization. Now, when I'm talking to students, it's usually a question that comes up. Either they ask me or I ask them. Now, interesting thing is, especially when I ask my students, I get varying answers. So people will say maybe 3 months, some will say 6 months. I have had somebody even tell me it will take 2 to 3 years to do the implementation. And so usually what is it? What are people thinking when they talk about 2 months, when they talk about 6 months, when they talk about 2 years? What is it people are thinking? So it actually boils down to the beginning of the development of your ISMS. When you come up to the project, when you're starting up the project, what is the first thing you're thinking about? You're thinking about the scope. So we look today at two things. You can either decide to have an extended scope where the organization is looking at a wide implementation, or we can then look at a limited scope where the organization is only looking at a very limited area, so that they do the implementation and then they move on, and then probably they'll tend to extend the scope during the surveillance audit, so they can keep increasing the scope of the ISO 27001 implementation. Now, here are some statistics you can look at. Basically, I've just picked some statistics from project management. This comes from the Chaos Manifesto, and basically you're looking at big versus small. Yeah. So if you're looking at big in terms of people, so the Chaos Manifesto looked at this in 2012, and so they looked at the projects that had small teams had higher chances of being successful than those that had bigger teams. Yeah. Then also, in terms of goals, the resolution of goals, the small projects, small projects had a 78% chance of getting the goals resolved than the bigger projects. And then again, look at banking. Yeah. So it shows you how this works. And if you look at many organizations, the bigger a project you take on, yeah, the more chance you have of not meeting your goals, of not achieving in terms of the people's aspect, or actually ending up with a very extended timeline where you're not actually meeting your goal. Now, what do we need to do to have a successful ISO 27000 implementation? The first thing you will see there, I've talked about appropriate scoping. So this is the emphasis of this webinar. The other things you might need, of course, is the support of management. Yeah, you need to have capacity development. You need to train up people. So the people in the project team need to be aware of what they're doing. And then you need, for example, if you're going to do consulting, you need to pick a correct consultant. this consultant needs to have both the skill, both the expertise and the knowledge in ISO 27001, and more than that, they need to be able to advise you when it comes to the scoping area, because you'll see the consultant is actually a partner in this journey. So they need to be able to tell you, hey, when you're scoping for your ISMS, pick either a narrow scope, or maybe this scope is too wide, or something like that. So they need to be able to start advising you right from the beginning where you're carrying out your scoping for your ISMS. And of course, last but not least, is you have to have the correct certification body. Now, let's go in. Where does the scoping become an issue when you're looking at the standard? So ISO 27001 standard, clause 4.3 is where it talks about the determination of the scope. So here we're looking at the standard itself tells us that we have to define some boundaries, yeah, around which we will then build our ISMS, yeah. And these boundaries, what comes into the consideration? The first thing that comes into the consideration is your external and internal issues that are referenced in clause 4.1. Here you're talking about the landscape of the, or rather the operating environment of the organization. So you're talking about anything that is affecting the organization from the external point of view, so be it political, be it technological, be it climate, be it environmental, anything governmental, things like those that are external, or internal issues which are within the organization, so be it the organization's culture, be it the org structure of the organization, be it the skill level of the people in the organization. Those are the internal issues that you then consider when you're scoping. The next thing that is referred into 4.2 is the requirements. These are requirements that are coming out from the interested parties. So you're talking about your customers, you're talking about your clients, you're talking about your competitors, you're talking about shareholders. So all these are interested parties and they have different requirements of the business. So you need to consider this also when you're scoping. Then of course, see there talks about the interfaces and dependencies between the activities that are performed both by the organization and that are performed by other organizations. So be they partnerships or supply, or your suppliers, your vendors, maybe there's something that you've outsourced. So these interdependencies and interfaces also need to be considered. Then of course the standard says that your scope should be available as documented information. So that is a requirement that has been specifically written down in the ISO 27001 clause 4.3 about the scope. So let's proceed. So in terms of determination of the scope, usually we look at three things. Now PECB has a course that's called ISO 27001 Lead Implementer. Now in this course, it trains you to be able to understand what is required in the implementation of an ISMS, so that you can be able to become a project manager. For example, you can take part in a project team so that you know what it takes in terms of the implementation of the ISMS. Now, when it comes to scoping, we usually look at three things. So we're looking at in terms of determining the boundary of the ISMS. We look at information systems, you look at the organizational, and you're looking at the physical boundaries. So when it comes to physical, it's the easiest one, because the physical boundary is basically your headquarters, your offices, your site, basically where you physically are. Then in terms of the information systems, you're looking at your IT, you look at your ICTs, you're looking at maybe what are you going to do, how are you scoping this ISMS? Is it going to be, for example, an ERP, if you have an ERP, or for example, if you are a cloud services provider, is that the system you're going to put in the scope? Or if you're a bank, you might only want to put in scope your online banking system, or if you're, for the people who are mostly in Africa, mostly in Kenya, we're looking at the mobile banking application or the mobile banking system. So maybe that is the one thing that you want to take within the scope. Also, if you look at the third item, there is organizational. And organizational, now you're looking at within the organization, are you only going to look at, say, ICT as a function, yeah? Or let's say maybe you're going to look at maybe an enterprise business as a function, or you're going to look at maybe if you have maybe financial systems in terms of the organization, maybe it is a function on its own. So maybe that's what you're going to consider when you're determining your scope. So usually, what happens is when we're doing this work practically, we tend to take a mix of the three. So for example, if it's information systems, you're going to be looking at, let's say in your organization, you have just recently invested in an ERP. Yeah? So let's say, for example, you've done an SAP implementation recently. So you want to be able to show the organization that there's a return on this investment, that this ERP actually has something of value to offer the business. So for you, that becomes a very critical thing. The other thing is, in terms of the strategy, there was a reason why you went through the ERP, because it was timed towards the strategy of the organization. So now, coming up with the ISO that fits your strategy is the best way to make sure that it is successful. So that would be, for me, one of the things if I was to advise a client, if there's this information system that they have as critical to their strategy, that's probably new, that still has all this thing about it where people are still wondering how will this thing help us, maybe you could concentrate on that. Now the flip side is this. Maybe you have this system that has problems and you have just gone through a major upgrade, so you just want to satisfy the business and the clients and the customers that it is actually good in terms of security of information and the functionality and all that. So those will be your considerations. Organizational, you take something small in terms of who is in charge of that information in the organization. I see many people going through IT, which is not bad, but definitely you have to have other other functions in the business coming in, otherwise then this is doomed to fail if it only remains in IT. Physical, usually guys will do their headquarters and their main data center. Okay, so let's proceed. So now I talked about two things. I talked about a large scope versus a limited scope. So these are just some of the things I picked up that would show you the merits and the demerits. Yeah, so it's not really comparing. Yeah, it's just looking at an expansive scope and looking at what it offers, and looking at a limited scope and looking at what it offers. So I'll not go through all of them, but basically I'll just want to highlight, like on an expansive scope, usually what people talk about is the utilization of effort. So you're saying, for example, if you come and implement ISMS in an organization, yeah, you want to do it, for example, if it'll take you a year or maybe a year and a half. By the time you're done with that, you've covered all the critical systems, all the critical applications in the organization. When you look at limited scope, you probably will not cover all the critical applications. You'll probably come up with something piecemeal. So you will do one, yeah, then build on that in the next cycle, maybe in another year build on it. So in the limited scope, you're looking at something maybe that will take you 3 or 4 years to cover all the critical applications. In the expansive scope, you're probably looking at, I'll go and cover all the critical applications in one big project. So that's basically how you're looking at it. So I as an implementer, I as a consultant, from my experience, I've found it that it is better or easier for an organization to go through the limited scope, where you first of all identify a very crisp boundary that is very well related to the strategy of the business, of course, and that then after that has been done, the business is able to take those learnings, to take that success, and then move it to the next scope, widen the scope, and then, of course, implement that for the wider organization. So symptoms of poor scoping, what do you see? What do you normally see? When you come into a project, what will tell you that here the issues of scope? So for example, first of all is the timelines. Timelines extend. This project doesn't end. So you scope the project to end in 6 months or 1 year. 2 years, 3 years down the line, we haven't yet reached the outcome. Yeah. Then the other issue is that the project outcome is not aligned to the strategy. For example, I mentioned that you have this ERP. The reason why you got the ERP was because it was tying to a certain strategy of the organization. Now, for example, you had a certain small system, yeah, that had nothing to do with where the business is going. But then you ended up implementing your ISMS there. So you will find that it doesn't tie to the strategy of the business. So basically, whatever you do, whether you finish, whether you don't finish, there's nothing to tie you down as a project manager. No one is interested in the business. It's basically, maybe it's an small IT project. So that becomes another issue of scoping. It is purely scoping. Then the third thing is about scope creep. And if you've been in a project, you know this is one of the major killers of any project. That means that the scope keeps changing because at the beginning the scoping wasn't done properly. Yeah, so it wasn't well documented. It wasn't very crisp. The boundaries were not clearly written down. It wasn't approved at the right levels. So everybody keeps introducing their own needs, their own requirements. So the scope keeps changing. So that again leads to your project timelines extending. Then confidence that the project will succeed is very low. That's usually the thing also when you have poor scoping. And then, of course, the project is dependent on individuals, which is another thing. So it may not survive a change. So for example, if the project manager was to leave the organization within the project timeline, the project will not reach completion because the scoping wasn't done properly. Now, Sentinel Africa is a risk management consultant. What we do is we carry out consultancy for organizations in terms of implementation of ISO 27001. We also do audits, and we also do training of personnel. So this is our methodology. So basically what we do is we do the assessment of the current state. So how do we do this? We come into organization, we talk to the people, we do interviews, we understand what is the role of the people, then we look at the criticality. So in terms of the criticality assessment, you're trying to understand of all these assets, all these systems, all these information processing facilities, which one is more critical than the other to the business. Yes? 3, which is also very key, is we need to understand what are the obligations of the organization towards its contractors, towards its clients, any contractual obligations, and any requirements in terms of the regulator. So those are the things we need to understand, which then it tends to tell us exactly what is very important in this business, what must be done for this business to be in place. So the other things we consider, of course, is the strategy of the organization. So you see your business SWOT there. If you've done a SWOT assessment, if they understand the external versus the internal environment, those are some of the things you pick up. Then, of course, we pick the list of them, interested parties and expectations. You'll see there 4.1 and 4.2 there, alluding to the clauses in the standard. Clause 4.1, which talks about internal and external issues, and clause 4.2, which talks about interested parties. Then, of course, the key deliverables will be our gap assessment report. And definitely what we are talking about today will be our ISMS Scope, which then, of course, will lead us to having a project plan, which then needs to be approved. Now, in conclusion, this is basically, after all this we spoke about, these are some of the things I picked up in terms of our learnings over the years, my experience, and also some of the things I've been reading up on. And one of the key thing I want to leave you with here is think big, act small. So think big. What does think big mean? Think big means you want to implement an ISMS based off of ISO 27001. You want to get certified. For example, you have this new system that has been built. For example, your business wants to go into a new direction. Your business is trying to get new markets, new customers. Your business wants to show that it is taking care of customer privacy, for example. Or let's say there's a new regulation in the market. There's a new regulation in your industry. For example, I'll give you an example of what happened in Nigeria a while back when the Central Bank of Nigeria decided that all banks must be certified against ISO 27001. It happened in Ghana the other day, where the bank decided that all mobile money operators must be certified against ISO 27001. So that becomes a regulatory thing. There's no running away from a regulatory obligation. So those are the things, those are the objectives, those are the big goals. So think about those big goals, but then how do you get your big goal? So come up with small steps, so act small. So one of the first things that I'll talk about here is the value estimation, right? So if you're trying to understand the value of a project, the smaller it is, the easier it is for you, because you're looking at it in terms of a very small scope. You're looking at this project achieving a very specific issue, and then once that thing is achieved, the project is successful, so you move on to the next thing. Now the next item there is about people. Yeah, so think about the SEAL Team 6. This is a very small team of 6 people, highly specialized people. So these guys are motivated. They're able to achieve the goals better than when you have a very big amorphous team. And you have, conflicts within the team. You have to understand what's going on here. So when you're dealing with a smaller team that's very highly motivated, highly skilled, and highly knowledgeable, you tend to achieve your objectives better and faster. Then, of course, when you have a smaller a smaller project, you're able to manage expectations better as a project manager. Then we have the big item there of the butterfly effect. which is something that people really take for granted. But I've seen this happening in organizations where you have a small project that was done to success. Yeah, then the fact that it was successful, it actually helps to bring that confidence in the organization. It brings that buy-in, because when you're being feted for succeeding, then you get that buy-in from management. The management understands that we did this thing and this thing was big, so there's that joy that you feel from having succeeded. And basically this now done, it compounds in terms of its effect to bring people together, and then they can go for the scope extension, where you have maybe in 3 or 4 years, you have now widened the scope to cover all the critical areas in the organization. Then of course, one of the big items about ISO, any ISO standard, is the continuous improvement. So you must show continual improvement when you implement a management system against an ISO standard. So when you start small and you keep improving, this is definitely a time to the aspect of continual improvement that ISO attests to. Then of course, motivation. So you talk about built-in motivation. So there's, well, how is it that you have built-in motivation? I talked about it when I talked about the butterfly effect. The thing is, you get a sense of accomplishment when you achieve something. So when you have a small project, you're basically improving your chances of accomplishing. And when you get that sense of accomplishment, it builds that motivation within the team, and they're able to go for more. They're able to go for bigger. So those are some of the big things that you'll be thinking about. That for me, I have seen this work and have used this in my own approach. And at Sentinel, we actually advise on this. You act small, start small, and then grow it, and you have a better chance of success. You have a better chance of buying from the organization. And remember, one of the biggest challenges for implementing ISO 27001 is not just building a management system, but is the change of culture. Because if you're going into an organization, you're trying to tell them, you're trying to teach them a new way of doing things. So this involves changing of the culture. So this is one of the things that you can't do quickly. You cannot change the culture of people one broad stroke. It takes time. So you start small and you keep doing it over time. Yeah. So this is PECB courses for ISO 27001. So PECB has 4 courses for ISO 27001. Basically, there's a 1-day course, which is an introductory course. Then you have a 2-day course, which is a foundation. Then you have the lead courses. So there's the lead implementer, and the lead auditor course, which are 5-day courses. And so those ones are the ones that train you to a level of expertise where you can actually manage a project, and the lead auditor where you can actually take part in the auditing of a management system, or you can be in charge of an internal audit team for the ISO 27001 internal audit. So that has been my discussion with you guys today. Thank you very much. So I will invite any questions now.
Thank you, Musa, for delivering this insightful presentation. As Musa also mentioned, the training at PECB is designed to provide you the required knowledge to carry out audits of information security management system against ISO 27001 and be able to run the processes involved in implementing ISMS as defined in ISO 27001. A PECB certificate will exemplify your dedication in implementing and managing these processes and frameworks. And most importantly, you will be recognized worldwide. For more information, please visit our website www.pcb.com. Now we will go ahead and take some time to answer some of the questions from the attendees regarding today's topic. One attendee asked, what are the main benefits that we can find by implementing the ISMS scope?
Okay, thank you for that, Adrian. So one of the benefits you get by implementing, I'll take it to wider. So implementing ISO 27001. Yeah, so you're building an information security management system. So one of the key benefits, of course, you're able to protect your information, your critical information assets. So what is it? First of all, you need to understand what are your critical information assets. You need to understand what is the critical information, and then you build processes around it in terms of protecting it. So the key thing we look at here is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. So that's one of the biggest benefits in terms of creating processes around which you then protect information. The other thing, which is a key benefit, is then you're looking for certification. Yeah, so depending on the organization, depending on your industry, this might be a regulatory requirement. So implementing an ISMS based off of ISO 27001, it shows that you are compliant to the requirements of the regulator. Yeah, as I've told you, both the banks in Nigeria and mobile money, mobile money organizations in Ghana are required by the regulator to be certified. So these are some of the things that you'll be taking to your management, taking to your board to tell them that this once we implement this is what we stand to gain. Okay.
Okay, another question is, can you specifically determine the duration of an ISMS implementation when all the factors for scoping is gotten right?
So I'll tell you actually, that's one of the things, and when we're doing even the PECB course itself says that a typical ISMS implementation takes anywhere between 6 months and 1 year. So when I started this, I said many people will tell you different things depending on their experience. But again, once you have the scope right, you're able to determine if you have a limited scope, yeah, versus an extended scope. So that's one of the biggest things that will be an advantage to you when you decide to have a limited scope. You're able to even tell your management that I expect this project to be done in 6 months, for example. But when you have an extended scope, it's it's actually out of your control. It's not very easy. It's not very easy to come up and say, yes, I'll be done in 6 months, because there's so many moving parts. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why, in fact, that question you've asked, that is one of the main reasons why you then go for a limited scope, so that you're able to come up with a project plan and you're able to stick to your project plan.
Thank you, Musa. And the last question for today, because of the time limitation, we have to justify why the scope is limited, or are we justifying the exclusion to the standard?
So the standard doesn't ask for you to justify whether it's limited or extended. The standard asks you to justify any exclusions from the scope. So when you're identifying your scope, yeah, we've talked about 3 things. So first of all, you're looking at the boundaries. So there'll either be physical boundaries, there'll be organizational boundaries, or there'll be information system boundaries. So as I gave you an example of the information system, I say, for example, let's do the ERP. So within the ERP in the organization, let's say you have your HR is included, your supply chain is included, your plant maintenance is included, you've included your finance and controls are included. So you see, your ERP is doing so many things, but you can come in and say that I'm only going to look at the ERP for supply chain process. Yeah? I'm only going to look at the ERP for only the plant maintenance process. The standard does not tell you that you can't do that. So the only things that you'll be going to be looking at, what are the direct interfaces, what are the direct dependencies that are included within your scope. Now, if you have something that is directly included and it is being handled by a third party, for example, or you've completely outsourced it, then you might decide to exclude it from your scope. So you see, for you to deliver this process, for you to deliver this this service, for example, for your customer, you require this third party. Yeah. But in the case of the scope, it is not in your control at all. So for example, you've outsourced it totally. So you can then, the standard says that in that case, if you're going to put them out of the scope, then you need to justify that exclusion. So you'll put it explicitly in your scope that this is an exclusion, and you'll put the justification for it.
Thank you, Musa. Thank you, Musa, again for this great presentation, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. I would like to let you know that this webinar will be recorded and posted to our website as well as on our YouTube channel. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey about the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you would complete it and provide us with your feedback. Also, if you are aware of an interesting topic that you would like to discuss and participants would benefit from, please feel free to write down your suggestions. We would like to inform you that next Wednesday we will present a webinar about key steps in ISO 27001 Management System Certification process. Thank you all and have a great day.